Kodak, like Fuji, made some great film which could be used in film-based cameras, and they actually were responsible for creating the first digital camera. So initially they were doing some R&D work in the 70s, and a Kodak engineer called Steve Sasson, he basically came up with the idea. They actually proved the whole concept way back in the 1970s. So what happened? Kodak showed that they were very keen to move things forward with film, so they went from black and white to colour, and they were responsible for that process. But when it came to digital, the problem was Kodak's bosses were caught up by the flaws and the processing time, the resolution in the concept of the digital camera, and it kind of put them off. One of the other things as well is they thought by creating a market for digital photography, it would take their traditional business away, which I guess happened anyway. But they could have really made a name for themselves and been one of the sort of keen players today. But unfortunately, they did sell their business back in 2006. So that's a little bit about Kodak. I'm going to go into the camera now and talk about this. So this camera is one of the models that Kodak actually made themselves and brought out, and it's surprisingly good for the actual age of the camera. So I would say its operating time is relatively fast to start up, and it's got some neat little features. It has got some flaws, so I will discuss some of those flaws in a short while. But yeah, the actual look of the camera is fairly kind of standard to what we can expect from that time. So it's a little bit kind of bulky, not particularly heavy. I'll show you a camera I've got that was actually a model of camera that I went traveling with around 2004. So this camera is by Premier Image Technology, which was a Taiwanese company. Again, they sort of sold their business. So you can see, actually I just put it down there. You can kind of see it's almost the same footprint. Let's have a look at the features. We'll start actually by looking at the outside of the camera. So in here we have a 4x optical zoom lens, and on the front we've got a microphone. We have a warning light for if you're using self-timer. And there's also a sensor there, a light sensor. Now, interestingly, there's an autofocus sensor here, and this camera will focus in the dark. It won't light up like a Christmas tree. It stays dark, and you can't really see what you're focusing on or what you're trying to take your picture of, but it will focus for you, and it can produce some decent shots actually. The flash is pretty powerful, it's a decent size. The other thing that you'll notice from the front view anyway is it has got a proper viewfinder. So this is a great feature on a camera like this, because the early digital cameras were known for being a little bit power hungry on the old batteries, and if you could turn off the live display, then that would go a long way to help you making the best use out of your batteries and get as many shots as you can. So that's the front of the camera there. Now I will go this way. Okay, it's mentioning 4x optical zoom. It's got a DC in of 3 volts. This is only to power the camera, not to charge the batteries. On this side, got the wrist strap fastened in there, the eyelet, and then we have a door, a sliding door, and already it's telling us here 3 things. There's AV out, so you could connect this to a television. There's also an SD MMC card compatible slot. You can see a SD card in there. And there's a proprietary USB cable. Now this is important to have the cable if you're ever using the internal memory. There is a small internal memory for pictures in this camera, so if you've lost your cable, then you will not get those pictures off very easily. I was able to use the cable because I'm quite lucky. I've got one set of wires still. So this is what the cable looks like. And that's the end, that's the plug end. Okay, so that's USB, a standard USB there. Now that goes into the computer, and I was able to plug it in without installing any Kodak software, and I could see the internal memory and the memory card memory. Both of those came up. The video just carries the video signal and audio. There we go, audio, and it's just one of these kind of stereo looking ones. Okay. Looking at the top, let's turn it around. We've got a speaker. We've got a button here for putting it into self timer mode and continuous shooting mode. There's also a flash button here. Okay, this is the back, so let's have a look at the back a minute. We've got the viewfinder, which has got the diopter adjustment, very handy. There's a dial to get into some of these modes. There's a dedicated share button. Now this allows you to go into a review menu of your photos and to mark them for basically sharing, and even marking them to be sent by email, and favorites, I think. So the thing with this though is it does require the Kodak software to be installed, and it mentions about using Windows machines up to sort of Windows XP, so I wouldn't know if the software is compatible. It probably isn't on later versions of Windows, and I couldn't tell you about the Mac. So it's got a delete button here, and then we've got the wide and telephoto zoom, a menu button, a review button, and there's a center joystick as well. So that's a joystick that moves around. You can select in the menu and press into it as it's centered, and that selects things as well. So that's what that does there. Still got the sticker on there. The display is pretty nice actually, but like I said a little bit earlier, with this age of camera, they were known for eating batteries. So it's probably best to run the camera with this display off using the viewfinder, which is perfectly adequate. Okay, on to the bottom of the camera, and we've got a proprietary connector here. This is an EasyShare dock. I think the EasyShare dock was a 6000, and the camera itself did come with a bit of plastic to allow it to fit into the dock a particular way. So I guess Kodak, with their different sort of bottoms to cameras, needed to have a way of managing it so all their sort of cameras at the time could use the same dock. So in here it mentions what batteries are required, and it talks about using lithium. Now lithium was recommended actually because that was the longest lasting sort of battery, but obviously you'd need to keep buying those. Alkaline and sort of rechargeables, so yes, it's good for that. Let's just open that up, and I'm probably gonna have to set the date again now, aren't I? So just 2 batteries, 2 AAs, meaning 3 volts, or a little bit under actually, because obviously these put out lower voltages, don't they? Okay, that's the front of the camera. Let's go into the settings and see what we have. Let's power on the camera and see if we've disrupted the internal memory with regard to date and time. So it's asking me again. It's also telling me that the battery hasn't too much life, so let's get on with the video. I'm gonna accept the year 2003, although I think this camera did come out maybe 2004, but they were just being safe. Now the display's gone because the mode of the camera, I've got it set up to blank out this. So let's bring that back up, and you can do that by pressing this button here. So that gives us the auto mode, which is responsible for doing everything, and it will even set the ISO. There's no manual setting of the ISO in this mode, just to warn you. And it looks like I've got automatic flash set up on the best picture setting. It's telling us in here how many pictures. Let's just take one. There you go. There's a countdown to how many pictures we have left, so 416. Let's move along to the next one, which is a sports mode, and this will increase the shutter speed. So that's quite good. Probably more useful outside though. There's a portrait mode. Again, I'm pressing this button here to bring this screen up, but you don't have to do that. You can change that in settings. There's portrait, and That's self-explanatory. Let's go on to the next mode. So the nighttime, and this basically allows us to use burst mode and self-timer, which is good. That's letting me set the flash options. Let's go back. Now, there's only two modes on this camera which let you select the ISO setting, and these are the landscape and the macro, which is kind of bizarre, but that's the way it is. So if we go to menu and scroll down, we can see a feature in here. It says auto, and we can pull that off and say, okay, I'm outside, it's going to be bright, I want it to never leave the ISO 100 setting. And that's obviously quite handy, but it would have been nice to have had that in auto mode. And again, in macro mode, it's the same with that as well. So we go into menu, scroll down, and it's set to auto. Let's set it to 100. Now with these earlier cameras, the higher the ISO, you are definitely going to see more noise. This camera was okay at night as long as you were close to the subject that you were taking a picture of, because the flash was fairly powerful. But if you were in a party and it was pitch black with very little light, then from a distance taking pictures, they just would not have come out very well at all. So don't think that you can use this camera for sort of nighttime shots. Although for close-ups it's probably quite good because you can kind of sneak up and take pictures and it won't flash. So maybe as a museum camera, it's quite good in that respect. So the other thing it can do is video. Now the video is very disappointing on this. It's only 320 by 160 and it's 15 frames per second. The camera will output to NTSC or PAL, so that's available in the settings. We can look at the settings quickly. There's really not much to see, is there? There you go, set to PAL there. So there's nothing you can really do in the menu for the video, and really I would say it's a waste of time, and it was a waste of time probably when this camera came out, because not long after there were other cameras that were definitely recording much better video at 640 by 480 at 30 frames per second. So yes, it is a bit of a letdown on this particular camera. The other thing about this camera that I don't like particularly is the fact that when you're in one of these modes here, you want to turn the thing off, you have to kind of make sure you stop one early before you get to the video position of the dial. Now this is a bit of a pain. It would be much better if this off was here and you could just, you know, go right back like that and the camera was off, but unfortunately it doesn't do that. And in some ways, instead of having this share button, which is, you know, which is okay, but you can kind of go into the review menu and you can go through cameras and do stuff. It is a shame that this perhaps isn't the button that sets the recording off for the video. So if you're, say, in auto and you were doing video, then it would be probably quite nice to just press this to actually go into video mode. I'm just going to go to review. The other thing that this camera does, which is a little bit strange, and when you go to kind of look at the images, it builds the picture up slowly, so it kind of looks blurred to start with, and then you can see a line of processing going on where it becomes sharper. I don't know if it's really going to show up on here. Let's try. You may see it. So that's a bit strange. So you can get into the share menu that way. There you go. And then you can tag your pictures. So you don't necessarily need this button here. I just think, looking back at the way this camera's designed, it would have been nicer to have had that button as a video record button to start and stop. And then, yeah, you could have had one less position on the dial even, couldn't you? So there's not really any manual control as such on this camera. So it is very basic and limited in that respect. But the plus side, it's got two positives, two really big positives for me anyway. And for the age of camera, when it came out, it could take some brilliant pictures. And the reason why is it's got two things going for it. And that's the use of the proprietary Kodak color science, which I would imagine is some custom firmware that's been written for it that can aid the actual picture and make it look quite punchy and colourful, in that it kind of has a very kind of nice film look to it. So that's a real positive, and they seem to fade it out, or at least not have it on dedicated sort of hardware as such. So I think some of the later models, just before they sold their business, that they didn't have this sticker on, so it was questionable if the algorithms were kind of working the same way, and even if they were using that in later models. And the other thing is obviously the lens. Let's turn this on. The lens, the Schneider Kreuznach Varrogon, and it's a 4x optical, which isn't too bad at the time because a lot of these camera sizes would have been 3x optical. This is a very, very good part of the camera. You've got two things going for it. You have the color science and you have the excellent quality lens, and it really does focus well, this camera. Everything is pin sharp in good light, so I must stress that in good light this camera will never take a blurred photo. There's not many of these around, I wouldn't have thought, and if you're one of the community who like collecting old cameras, I would recommend that you start looking for standard SD cards that aren't SDHC, and ones that are relatively low in size, so you're kind of backwards compatible with lots of older cameras, and also the MMC cards as well. They will work, but obviously yeah, best to be looking for a good supply of old digital cards, because if you haven't got those, then you might pick up an old model and it'll be pretty useless to you, because obviously you need a compatible memory card. Now, I did try to do some investigating to see if I could look in a service manual for this particular camera model, and I could not find a service manual online for this one. I did find a service manual for another model which has this sticker, so I did have a look at it, but there's not much to say. In the service manual for the other camera, which was a C300, it does mention the processor as being a CDS-AD, so that's obviously analog to digital, and I can't find any more information about it. So that obviously goes into the ASIC, and the ASIC then goes to memory and various other bits on the camera board. So anyone know, and anyone ever taken apart this particular model could let me know. I'll be very interested. I'm not going to be taking any of these cameras apart myself because they work well. They don't suffer from the other issue with a lot of mid-2000 cameras, in that there was a design fault, a CCD sensor design fault, and that renders lots of models useless. The Canon cameras and the Fujis were affected by it, so just be a little bit careful. Do your research before you press the buy it now, or you bid on a old camera. But as far as these cameras go, yeah, great cameras. I didn't even mention the mount there as well, the tripod mount, which is obviously really important if you're using this camera indoors. But yeah, overall, a good camera that starts up relatively quickly compared to some cameras like the Premiere, which I showed you. So this Premiere, my word, it's slow, but it has a good lens. It's only a 3x, but yeah, it took some pretty good pictures actually, so that wasn't a bad camera. So there you have it, that's the Kodak, and it's a surprisingly good camera for picture taking. I'll put some pictures at the end of this video for you to have a look at, and as always, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and definitely put your own thoughts into the comment section so I can take those on board. I'd like to know a little bit more about the internals of these Kodak Color Science cameras. This is what I got with the camera back in the day. So it's a Kodak Getting Started guide, and it comes with the EasyShare software, which is kind of nice. So the EasyShare software does work without the dock. It will work if you've only got the USB cable. There's a quick start guide here, I think. Let's have a look at that in a minute. Let's turn this over. The other thing which is quite good is it's got the manual. So the manual is there on CD. It's talking about some free software upgrades, so the camera was fully upgradable as well. And there's a little bit about the extra that you'd have had to have bought. That's the Easy Share system. And there's a warranty one as well. So let's just get this quick start guide out. And how much of this I can show you with the way my camera's set up. Let's see what we can do. So we're talking about inserting the batteries first. Well, not first. It's talking about the software, installing the software first, telling us how to install the batteries. It came with a lithium battery to get you started, probably to give you false expectations. So you would have used a lithium battery, you would have let that go dead, and then go out and get regular batteries for it, like alkalines, and been shocked probably by how long the camera lasted. Such was the way these cameras were. So we've got a little guide here telling us how to set date and time, and telling us as well how to take pictures. Mentioning actually a green light there on the kind of viewfinder area, so when that goes green you're ready to go. And talking about reviewing as well, and then transferring to the computer. So nothing too bad there.